The deadline for Hye-seong Kim to pick his team is on Friday, and the Mariners apparently have submitted an offer. We'll go over some of the reports about how his market is shaping up and more coming up here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Wednesday, January 1st, 2025. Happy New Year, everyone. This is Tiding Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're going to be talking some Hye-seong Kim on today's show. We'll also discuss if Corbin Burnes signing with the Diamondbacks could have a trickle-down effect on the Mariners, and we'll also take a look at the state of Pete Alonso's free agency. But before we do that, shout out to our title sponsor today, FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, and it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And if you want to hear from me and Colby even more and help support the show, check out our Patreon. All you have to do to check that out is click the link in the description of this episode. So, Hye-seong Kim, if you've been watching our show over the last few weeks, you know all about him at this point. You know our feelings on him. Korean infielder, good athlete, good defender, contact-oriented bat, has hit for a high average over in the KBO. Obviously concerns about how that's going to translate over to Major League Baseball, but he is nearing his decision on where he's going to make his Major League debut. The deadline for him to make that decision is on Friday, and there's been some reports coming out of Korea about who's still in on him as we approach that deadline. So yesterday, it was reported that 5 teams are considered finalists for Kim's services. That includes your Seattle Mariners, as well as the San Diego Padres, the Toronto Blue Jays, the Anaheim Angels, and the Cincinnati Reds. It was also reported that the highest offer Kim has received is somewhere in the ballpark of 3 years, $20 million. It was also reported that the Mariners had made an offer, but that it was not the highest offer to Kim, and I've actually been able to confirm that with a source of mine as well. So we do know that the Mariners have an offer. Doesn't seem like it is the highest offer that Kim has received, though he has said that money doesn't necessarily or isn't necessarily the biggest factor for him making a decision this winter. Now today, kind of a conflicting report came out saying that 3 or fewer teams are in on Kim, and the highest deal might only be like 3 years, $15 million. So that's kind of interesting. But again, I have confirmed it that the Mariners have made an offer. So if it really is truly down to just 3 teams or fewer, the Mariners are one of them. I can say that with confidence. So it's possible that we're actually going to have some news to talk about on Friday. Finally, an actual Major League signing by the Mariners by the next time we hop on this show. It does seem like Kim is going to take his decision up to his deadline day on Friday, so we'll probably find out at some point that day. Maybe tomorrow, we'll see. And again, like we've said, you know, if he does make a decision on Thursday, or if anything else happens on a day that we're not scheduled to record, we will record. We'll do an emergency episode. Colby, as we get closer to this potentially happening, how are you feeling about this?
Yeah. Like fine. I will say it's a relief that, assuming the reports from today are correct, that it's going to top out somewhere in the 3 years, $15 million range. I think that's an appropriate number for Kim. It's a little bit of a risk still, even at that number, because there's a chance you just flush $15 million down the drain. But at $5 million a year, that's much more manageable than 8 to 10 to 12. Some of the early numbers we heard on Kim. So, yeah, there are some things that I don't doubt are going to translate pretty seamlessly, like the defense at second base, which will be the best second base defense the Mariners have had since early Robinson Cano, probably. Plus, the base running, like he's a good base runner. That doesn't, stay in Korea with him. He's good speed, not elite speed, but he's going to run the bases pretty well. He's going to cut the bases pretty well. And if he can get on base, he'll probably steal 20 bags. But that's the big question, right? Can he get on base? Because if he could, like if Major League Baseball teams were convinced that this guy could hit, he would be making, $15 million a year because the defense and the base running are that good. So I'm still really concerned about the bat. I haven't talked to or read anybody who seems to think that Kim is just going to come over and just do what he does in Korea and be that type of player. There's really no power to speak of, so it's not like his hits are going to be super impactful. They're going to be a lot of singles. He doesn't walk a ton, which is a concern because obviously you typically do things better in the States than you do in the KBO.
Yeah.
Or you do in any of the foreign leagues because Major League Baseball is just flat out harder. The KBO, the level of competition in the KBO has gotten higher over the years. It is, it's not quite the MPB, but it's getting there. And so, you do have to. It is different than it was even 10 years ago, right? Like there are more players coming over who are viable big leaguers, but it's still a big risk. Now, again, at $5 million a year, that's fine. If it's 3 and 15 is what it ends up being, and you're the Mariners, you might even be able to kind of, flip that and backload it a little bit. So it's only a $3 million hit this year, and so on. So like overall, if the deal comes in and it's in the 3 for 15 total range, then like fine, that's a worthwhile risk. You have a second baseman at the very least is going to be an above average to plus glove. And then you just kind of hope that he's like a 90 WRC plus. And if you can do that, you probably have a 2.5, 3-win player just based on defense and base running alone. My concern is that he bottoms out and he's like a 65 WRC plus guy, and you just have a $5 million bench piece.
Yeah, you basically get like May to the end of the season, Josh Rojas.
Right. And at Josh Rojas's price, even that was still, a problem. So like, even though you're paying him less, or you paying him, less than you would for other established second basemen, you're still paying him more than you would for Ryan Bliss. And I'm not convinced that he's more likely to hit at the big league level than Ryan Bliss.
Yeah.
And
like I said, I think it was a week ago. I kind of view, or I would put Kim more or less in the same bucket as like the Ryan Blisses of the world, the Austin Shuttons of the world, fringe 26-man roster guys.
Mm-hmm. Like they might pop and become like regulars.
Yeah.
Like it's possible.
Yeah.
It's not likely at all is kind of the point. And they're more AAA depth guys who, maybe can be role players, but more than likely they're taxiing back and forth between Tacoma and the big leagues. Like there's a high probability that's who Kim is. And again, we should note like Kim has been a good player over in Korea. He has not been an elite hitter. He wasn't this last year, at least. He was a 117 WRC plus in the KBO. That's probably not going to translate too well to the major leagues. Like the year before, I think he was 130.
Yeah.
And the one thing he has done over the last couple of years is he has added more power to his game. It's mostly in the form of doubles. Like he's not going to hit a ton of home runs. I think his career high is 9.
The Mariners could use more doubles.
They could, but they could also use more home runs. So in fact, the home runs are better than doubles. Kim is fine. Like at $5 million a year, that's fine. But it's still a risk, even at that price. And my hope would be is that by getting Kim at that number, and again, maybe backloading it, maybe you're only paying him 2.5 this year or 3. It's because you're planning on using that money to go get like an actual like impact bat at third base or first base or in the outfield, like at least somebody who's established as a bit. Like you can't just be like Shin's the third baseman, Kim's the second baseman. We solved our infield. No, you haven't. No. So we'll see. But I at 3 and 15, it's going to be pretty hard for me to complain about that game.
Yeah, especially if it is backloaded a little bit and it's only like a $2 to $3 million hit in 2025. Yeah, I'm pretty open-minded to the possibility. of Kim. I think it's an interesting shot to take, and he's someone that seems to perfectly align with the offensive philosophy that's been laid out by Edgar and Kevin Seitzer. It's a very aggressive approach, up the middle approach, contact oriented, put the ball in play, let your athleticism do the work. It makes a lot of sense why the Mariners are so interested and why we've consistently heard over the last couple of months, like Mariners when it comes to Hye-seong Kim.
Right.
So yeah. The other thing too is like a lot of the people talking about Hye-seong Kim, they haven't watched him play. I haven't watched him play. We're reading box scores and going off of, reports here and there that we've seen on Twitter. Mm-hmm. And obviously we can,
watched a few highlights and at bats and all that stuff, but you don't really get a good feel for a player based on that stuff. So
we can make obviously some educated guesses on how things might translate just based on other players that have made the jump and all that. But yeah, none of us know definitively how he is going to translate from Korea to the States. So yeah, maybe the Mariners see something here that they think they can take advantage of, and a couple of these other teams that are in on him also feel that way, and we'll see how it goes. But yeah, this isn't a slam dunk though. Like if they sign him, he's going to be your opening day second baseman.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But it's not a slam dunk that he's any better than Cole Young, Ryan Bliss, anyone else that might play second base for you in 2025.
That he's better than Jorge Polanco gave you last year.
Yeah.
Like better defensively, but if the bat is bad enough, it's like a net neutral. So, I guess we'll say this just because a lot of the questions about Kim as he comes over are similar questions to what we heard 24 years ago about a guy who came over. So yeah, Hye-seong Kim is Ichiro, definitely confirmed.
That's what you just said.
Yeah, I knew you were going to go there.
We all heard it.
Yeah. So, again, like this, like slap the ball around, use your speed, play good defense thing. Like, can that work in the majors? Yes, absolutely, it can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is Hye-seong Kim Ichiro? I'm going to go out on a limb and say no, but
yeah.
We'll see.
Sure.
Is Kim going to hit 350, win an MVP, and get 200 hits in his first year? I say no. I'll take the under on all those. But,
sure.
We'll see what happens. But, Kim is like the most like signing the Mariners could possibly make. But hey, you know what? Any addition to the 40-man roster right now would be welcome news.
Just get on the board.
Yeah.
At this point.
Check something off the list, even if it's like checked off in pencil, not pen. Like that's still better than just sitting here with what you have on hand.
Yeah. So we'll find out in a little under 48 hours. So again, if he signs with the Mariners, whenever that happens, we'll do an episode. If that's on Friday, we'll do an episode. If it's tomorrow, we'll do an episode, and we'll probably pretty much just reiterate this conversation that we just had.
Well, it also allows us to turn the page because they have second base figured out. We don't need to fit. Well, they have second base figured out. Let's talk about third base. Let's talk about first. Let's talk about the relief pitchers. Like, what's the next step is probably going to be the biggest part of our conversation if they land Kim. It's not a for sure thing. So they still might not even we might get to Friday and just be like, well, they still haven't done anything. So we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and if they don't do anything, then Fan Fiction Friday on Friday, like always.
Yeah. I'm so excited. You guys got to keep up the good work.
Colby's starting to become negatively polarized against Fan Fiction Friday.
I saw a trade proposal this morning that just makes me think the worst of you guys. So we'll see.
All right. So we're going to talk a little bit more about something that we talked about kind of on Monday. That's Corbin Burnes signing with the Diamondbacks and how that might have a trickle-down effect on the Mariners in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Not only can you bet on who will win the game, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. It's our first episode of 2025, and we're going to talk a little bit more about something that we got, well, kind of asked about on Monday, because I mentioned like, hey, Luis Castillo to the Blue Jays could make some sense, and someone asked about that, and we talked about that a little bit. And that's because Corbin Burnes signed with the Diamondbacks, and obviously Burnes was someone that the Blue Jays were apparently aggressively pursuing, as well as the San Francisco Giants. So now that Burnes is off of the board and he went to a team that is kind of a surprise, there isn't, like, you're not going to get a pitcher that's as good as Luis Castillo now, on at least in the free agent market. On the trade market, maybe, like Pablo Lopez is apparently being floated out there. Who knows who else might? Maybe. Yeah, Dylan Cease. Who knows who else might get traded? There might be a surprise. But yeah, so I mostly just talked about the Blue Jays aspect of this, which I came to the conclusion that it really isn't even worth talking about, because I don't think Castillo's waiving his no trade clause to go to Toronto for a multitude of reasons. But Colby, do you think that Burnes signing with the Diamondbacks, which again, kind of a surprise there, that connection, do you think that helps the Mariners in terms of being able to trade Castillo and maybe accomplish what they want to ultimately accomplish with a Castillo trade, which to me feels impossible, but yeah.
No, it doesn't help them. No, I don't think it hurts them, because I don't think the problem was like the number of teams that were interested in trading for Luis Castillo. I think the problem, quote unquote, I use that term very loosely, is what the Mariners wanted in return for Castillo, which I'm pretty convinced at this point is they want an everyday bat that they could put in their lineup, and they want the arm to replace Castillo. Probably not going to get that. So,
and they want to do that while freeing up most, if not all of the money. Right. Yeah.
Right. So you need like a number 6 hitter, or a number 1 or a leadoff guy, or like a number 6 type, somewhere in that range, plus like a number 4 starter who's ARB1 or pre-ARB. Like, I think that's the bigger hang up than because I think there are plenty of teams who would be very interested in Castillo. I just don't think any of those teams are willing to spend what the Mariners want or would need to get back into trade. Now, what could happen, and this is where maybe the Burnes thing helps you out, is are the Diamondbacks now willing to eat, significant chunk of Jordan Montgomery's deal to go get him? Are they now willing to trade Merrill Kelly, who's not making a ton of money? Because if they're willing to do those things, and I think Kelly's going to make like $8 million this year, something like that.
Yeah, I think it's 7 or 8.
Yeah, so like if Montgomery or Kelly, if at 6, 7, 8 million, whatever the number is, right? They would have to pay down Montgomery's contract to get him there. But if either of those guys are now available or cheaper than they were, a week ago, then maybe Seattle can make a separate trade there to get the arm, and then they feel more comfortable just trading Castillo for the bat, or the bat and the prospect, or the bat and the bullpen arm. Like, maybe it changes their asking price on Castillo a little bit, because just maybe we can get Merrill Kelly for cheap, or maybe probably not cheap, but you know what I mean? We can get like a number 4 starter who's making number 4, or really like number 6 money. Like, we can go get that guy. Yeah. So maybe that's the way it helps, but no, I don't think that I don't think it helps, because I think Baltimore was still interested in Castillo before Burnes signed, and I think they just realized that trade's not going to happen. So,
but do you think teams get more desperate now? Because again, you're not going to go out into the free agent market and get a starting pitcher who's as good as Luis Castillo. That's just not possible.
Right. No, I think the area where, you kind of get hung up on there, though, is that like the teams that maybe are more desperate, a team like San Francisco, who do they have to give you that is worth Luis Castillo? Because Lamont Wade is not a headliner for Luis Castillo.
No, it's like the Mariners would have to be in love with Tyler Fitzgerald and what he did in 96 games. and think that's real.
Or they'd have to be like, we like Ramos, the outfielder, so much that we're going to have Luke Raley be essentially our everyday first baseman, and Ramos is going to play left and right. And, they could pivot there. And Ramos is essentially Teoscar Hernandez. Like, that's pretty much the profile there. A little less athletic, but, I'm not talking about young Teo. I'm talking about Mariners Teo. So, yeah, maybe there's something there. But then it's like, okay, like, do you like Hayden Birdsong? Do you like Kyle Harrison still? Like, there's not the arm that's there. And so I think the one team that I could see getting desperate enough to be like, okay, now we have to go get Castillo because we missed on Burnes would be San Francisco. And I think there's at least a shot that Castillo would waive his no trade to San Francisco, where I don't think there's much of a shot he would do it for Toronto, who would be the other team that would seemingly be more desperate. But the problem is that they don't have the goods. Like, their farm system is trash. They don't have an extra infielder to give you. Their rotation, honestly, isn't that good after you get by Webb. So they don't have a lot. So it really is either the Mariners have to love Fitzgerald, and they probably need significantly more than that, even if they do like him, or they have to really like Ramos, and then they have to like one of the arms, or they're taking like a bulk deal. And maybe the bulk deal is like, hey, we'll take Ramos and Birdsong and a bullpen arm or something like that, and a prospect. And then at that point, are the Giants out, or are they just going to go sign Pivetta, or what do they do? So I don't think it helps all that much, because I think the one or two teams that might be more desperate now for Castillo were never real options for Castillo, because they just don't have, the goods that makes it worth the Mariners trading Castillo. I think that's the real issue.
Well, and I think the Mariners have set a criteria that's just impossible to completely fill.
Right.
Again, like, it seems pretty clear that the boxes they want to check: get an everyday bat, get that starter, or at least be situated well enough to go out and get that starter, which again could be like Merrill Kelly, like you mentioned, and then get most, if not all, of the contract off the Bucks. I think you can accomplish two of those three things, maybe.
Yeah, I haven't found a deal yet where that allows you to accomplish all three of those.
Yeah.
That the Mariners would take, and that the team, swapping for Castillo would also take. I haven't found that deal yet. So that's the criteria. There's basically no shot Castillo gets traded, and the Corbin Burnes signing really doesn't have anything to do with that.
Like, they want Castillo to be valued by other teams as if the contract doesn't matter. The contract isn't even really part of the conversation.
Right.
And yeah, in today's day and age, even with how limited the starting pitching options are and how good Castillo is relative to his contract, just don't see that happening.
No. And I would say that, for the record, I totally get why they said no to the supposed
the Yoshida Casas deal. Yeah, we talked about that.
Right. Which Breslow said, like, no, we never even got close. And it's like, okay, I don't know who to believe here. I don't really care. If that deal
was too much
off,
conflicting information about those negotiations.
Right. We have no idea at the end of the day what that was. But no, I don't think they should have done that just to make sure they could get, because they were only going to clear $7 million, and Yoshida's not that good. So
yeah, my stance on that, and seeing a lot of fans saying like, oh, they should have done that. Like, I don't know. I probably could talk myself into that deal.
Yeah, but I don't think it would be terrible if they did it, but I don't think it was so good they were stupid not to take it.
No, it's definitely an imperfect deal because Yoshida's just not a good fit for the roster.
No.
And
you lose all your money to go get that replacement pitcher that you need.
And again, my stance is like, yeah, the Mariners need to do something, but they don't need to do every single thing that gets reported that is available to them.
No.
So yeah, I didn't think that deal was a great fit, especially if they're not in love with Casas. Like, if they like Casas, but they don't love him. Taking on Yoshida to complete that deal doesn't really make a ton of sense.
Nope.
So, yeah. All right. Well, just talked about Casas again for like the millionth time of the offseason. We've talked about a lot of first basemen. Some of them that we haven't really talked about, though, at first base is Pete Alonso. But Jon Heyman continues to mention the Mariners and Pete Alonso, which I think we can put 2 and 2 together on why the Mariners are being connected to Pete Alonso by Jon Heyman and Jon Heyman alone. But we're going to talk about it anyway in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by Gametime. So I used to live in New Mexico, and down in New Mexico, there are 0 pro sports teams, and a lot of bands and artists that I listen to skip going there more often than not. So when I moved to Toronto, where there's a baseball team, a basketball team, a hockey team, even a soccer team, and there's great music being played every night in the city, I was right in my element. When I want to catch a ball game or my wife and I want to see a band, I always get my tickets through Gametime. And that was the case well before Gametime sponsored our network and before I even joined the network, because it is truly the best ticketing service out there, hands down. I truly believe that. And now it's getting even better thanks to Gametime Picks. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I can just go on the app, it'll show me the best deal right away, it'll show me the exact view I'll have, and most importantly, it'll tell me exactly what I'm going to pay with Gametime's all-in pricing, so there are no annoying little fees that pop up at the last second. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB, that's LOCKEDONMLB, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. So again, Jon Heyman keeps on mentioning the Mariners and Pete Alonso. And you know what's going on here. Like, Jon Heyman is from New York. He works closely with Scott Boras, who just so happens to be Pete Alonso's agent. And oh, look at that. The Mets offered Alonso well short of what he's aiming for on the market. Apparently, the reported offer was 3 years, $90 million. And Alonso said no to that because he wants like 7 years. He wants the final contract of his career. That's what he's trying to make happen this offseason. And he's not getting it. And now options are starting to run thin for him because so many teams have addressed first base. And who are the teams still out there that need first base help? The Seattle Mariners. They lost out on Carlos Santana. They weren't able to get a trade done for Tristan Casas. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The Mariners are being used as leverage against the Mets for Pete Alonso's negotiations. Pete wants to go back to New York. The Mets want Pete back. It makes a ton of sense in the world. It makes all the sense in the world. It's going to happen eventually. So, yeah, I don't think there's really any shot that the Mariners are actually in on Pete Alonso. I know we constantly talk about the Vladimir Guerrero Jr. thing in the summer, and they clearly were going to make an exception for him. I don't think Pete Alonso is also on that exception list for the Mariners. So,
no, year-old who's gotten a little bit worse every year for the last 3 years, doesn't really have the star power of a Vlad Jr. No, he's not on that list. No. So, yeah, I mean, the only way that I could potentially see it happening where I'll start to buy into the idea that maybe they're interested, maybe they're looking at it, is if his market gets so bad and the Mets move on, they do something different at first base, or maybe they sign Alex Bregman and that means that they're going to move Vientos to first base. And that's pretty much all the money that they're going to spend for the offseason. If that happens, and then maybe the Giants do something different at first base, whatever. At that point, okay, because, I mean, what are the options remaining for Pete at that point? He's not going to go to Minnesota. Minnesota isn't spending money this offseason. At the very least, we know that the Mariners have some money to spend, theoretically. And maybe they would be willing to expand that a little bit in order to make Pete Alonso happen. But not at $30 million AAV, right? It would have to be something like what Matt Chapman signed for last year, which was
3 and 60, but the 2 other years on the deal are both player options, and it's like $20 million in the first year, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that works. Maybe.
But even then, at that cost, other teams might get interested who aren't interested now. And if you're Alonso and your plan is to hit the free agent market again next year, playing a whole year in Seattle, not much of a selling point.
Yeah, no. So yeah, like there's obviously all the issues that come with being a hitter, going to Seattle, especially if you're essentially playing on a 1-year deal.
Yeah.
Right. Because Alonso obviously would be trying to re-enter the market next year and get the deal that he wants right now. Right. If it were to come down to that.
I think the only way you get Alonso is if you basically give him what he thought the Mets were going to offer him at this stage.
Yeah, if you give him the 7-year deal.
If you give him the 7-year, basically the Chris Bryant deal, right? Like 7 years, 180 some odd million, bid against yourself, essentially double what the Mets' current offer is, then maybe you have a shot. But are the Mariners going to do that? No. Should they do that? No, not really. They probably shouldn't. It's not a great idea. Would you still be excited if they did that? Sure, because it's fun. But in the long run, that's not really a good idea. Alonso's not that type of guy. And again, he's 31 years old. Like, it's not 26-year-old Vlad. So, yeah, we'll see how this works. My guess is that he'll continue to be linked to the Mariners, specifically by Heyman, until he ultimately re-signs with the Mets. But I don't think that this is anything more than like, hey, we need to create some leverage here for Pete, and the other teams that we were using as leverage, they've all taken their first baseman and gone home. Seattle. And we could also maybe put a little bit of pressure on Seattle from their fan base, blah, blah, blah. And maybe they do actually enter the bidding, at which point we can use them against the Mets and yada, yada, yada. Like, it's all a PR game. We know who's feeding Heyman this information. We know why Heyman is using it the way he is. Like, it's not like, I don't want to tell you guys not to get your hopes up, but don't. Because it's not happening.
There's a very specific situation that has to happen where this becomes maybe realistic. Right. And I say maybe realistic. I'm not even willing to commit to it at that point that it could happen.
Right. Like, technically, the chances this happens are not zero. But sure. I would say the chances are significantly higher that you could have gotten Shohei Ohtani last year than they are that you get Pete Alonso this year.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Have fun with the rumors, but that's all they are. And you notice, like, Heyman's, like, wording is very intentional even. He doesn't say that, like, they've contacted the Mets or, like, they've talked contract. It's like, they might be interested. They're a team on the periphery. That's a team that could make some sense. Like, he's not even willing to say, like, the Mariners are definitely talking to Alonso and his camp about a contract, because they're not. So,
right. Yeah.
I just
and unless it gets reported by, like, someone that's not in New York, someone that's not Jon Heyman, then I'm not willing to really take it very seriously.
And, like, actually reported, not like, a team to watch here could be the Mariners.
Yeah, no, not the Morosi way of reporting it.
It is reporting. Like, sources, the Mariners and Pete Alonso's camp have talked in recent days. They have exchanged numbers or whatever, like, blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
At
that point, I'm willing to take it seriously. But right now, no.
As long as it's just like could, might, maybe, potentially, like, if those
the other team that got mentioned by Heyman was the Toronto Blue Jays, who are literally trying to sign their face of the franchise first baseman to a massive extension. I don't think they're going after Pete Alonso right now. Now they seem very desperate to just get anyone to take their money. Apparently now they're the front runners for Anthony Santander. So who the hell knows? Maybe they're like,
Santander
Pete,
to get 30 AAV.
Yeah, Pete, we're gonna give you a ton of money to be our everyday DH. I don't know. Right.
Or we're gonna have Vlad Jr. be our everyday third baseman.
Oh my God.
Like, cool. Get him hurt before he goes on free agency. Awesome. I mean, I guess at that point you could trade Vlad, but like, so yeah, it's the Mets. You know, I think we all know it's the Mets.
And if it's not the Mets, it's probably the Giants.
Yeah. Like Seattle on paper makes some sense simply because they need a first baseman. They need some power, blah, blah, blah. They kind of need, a co-star in the lineup. But A, I don't know if Alonso's that star anymore. And B, like, they're just not going to spend that money, particularly, and they're not going to give him 7-8 years like he wants because.
Well, I mean, Pete is used to playing little brother to Julio. So,
yeah, I mean, but like, when have we ever heard Jerry interested in offering anybody a 7-year contract who's not named Julio Rodriguez?
Right.
Who was literally 21 when he signed the thing. Like, it just, it's the years more than the money.
Yeah, no, it's again, only way that maybe it happens is if they think they can get him on like that Matt Chapman type of deal. And they're willing to expand 2025 payroll for that sake, which is a whole other conversation that I have a lot of doubts about.
Like, maybe if they do find somebody to give them exactly what they want for Castillo, maybe at that point.
Sure. Yeah, that's the other aspect of this is like they trade Castillo, then maybe that's because like we've been wondering at this point, now that Walker's off the board, now that some of these other guys are off the board, like, all right, if they did save quite a bit of money on a Castillo trade, who would they give that to?
Right.
I think at this point, the logical answer to that is that they would just spread that money across multiple of their needs. But maybe it would be for Pete Alonso. But again, they're not going to give him a 7-year deal. They would probably turn around and offer him a 3 to 4 year deal.
They probably do like 4 and like 110 or whatever. And if you're Alonso, like 3 and 90 and 4 and 1.
There's already, and there was the report earlier this offseason that he'll give the Mets a final opportunity to counter before he accepts another offer from a different team. So, yeah, if you're offering him 4-110, the Mets are going to top that.
Probably. Or they're going to add a 4th-year option at $30 million.
Unless, again, the Mets, they go out, they get Bregman, they move Vientos first, then probably at that point they're not interested.
Even then, they have the DH. Like,
yeah.
I mean, we'll see. But, like, it's not going to happen. There's like a 1 in a million shot that the stars align and Alonso is a Mariner. And again, even if that is the case, at 7 years, I really don't want Alonso because I feel like they'll use that contract as an excuse not to further invest in this club. So,
all right. So that is going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Tiding Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at @LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Tiding Gonzalez and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. We're also on Blue Sky. You can follow me at TDG, Colby at MLB Colby, and the show at Locked On Mariners. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.